The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 5, Into Battle. Chapter 19. Tal stared down at the two chosen, then up at the crackling violet light above his head. It had formed into the shape he knew well, the jagged lightning crown worn by the Empress on the day of Ascension and Dark Return. Why was this strange light replica of the crown hovering over his head?
"I'm so sorry, Highness,"
sobbed Uthern.
"She made me do it."
The Empress hissed and scratched at Uthern. In a second, they were rolling around on the ground, weakly kicking and hitting each other, more like children or baby animals than people. Tal bent down and pulled them apart. They were so thin and light he could have picked one up in each hand. He sat them back in their chairs, and their servants hurried forward to straighten their clothes and hair. "Why do you call me Highness?" he asked. The anger had all gone out of him now, though the crown of violet light remained. He felt cold and hard now, without anger or mercy.
"You wield the violet keystone,"
whispered brother and sister together.
"Are you Remelin come again to punish us?"
Tal looked at the stone on his finger, now revealed in all its violet glory. He remembered the skeleton in the heatway tunnel. It must have been the late Emperor Merkur, who had not quite managed to escape the traitors who had supplanted him. He also remembered Ebbet splitting the sunstone. What he wore on his finger now was only half the violet keystone. The other half was probably atop the mast of the Far Raider ship, or lost with Mila upon the ice, he thought with a pang. But even half the violet keystone might be enough to release Lokar and his father. It might be enough to reseal the keystones and save the Veil. It might be enough to rally the Chosen and turn them against Sushin and Sherakor. But only if Tal had the courage and the strength to use the keystone properly. Now there really was no one else he could go to. It was all up to him. He had to make the right decisions, starting right now. Tal felt like he had before he decided to climb the Red Tower, in a life that seemed long ago. That simple decision had changed everything. Now he stood on the brink once more, in the frozen moment before he did something that could not be undone. He felt every muscle in his body tense, as if he were a spring being compressed as far as it would go. What would happen when it was released? Tal stared at the two cringing Chosen. What was he to do with them? What was his next step? He couldn't kill them, he realized. He might not really be a Chosen anymore, but he wasn't an Icecarl either. He was prevented from making a decision by a shout from Adris, who had drifted off to suck up water from an ornamental pool nearby. Tal turned to see what was the matter. As he did so, Cathild and Uthern both leaped forward, drawing crystal daggers from the arms of their chairs.
"Die!"
they screamed. Tal twisted back, but he was too slow to do anything else. The daggers flashed down and were met by bolts of violet lightning from the crown above his head. Crystal exploded into powder, and then more lightning struck, straight at the hearts of the Empress and the Light Vizier. Tal reeled back and was caught by Adris as the violet lightning jumped the gap between Cathild and Uthern and struck their servants as well. There was a tremendous flash, a boom louder than any of Adris's thunder, and all the crystal leaves were blown off the canopy. Tal and Adris were thrown to the ground. Through slitted eyes, Tal saw Cathild and Uthern struck again and again by bolts of violet lightning. They played over their bodies, striking every part of them, the flashes blinding and the thunderclaps deafening. Sunstones on the Chosen's clothing absorbed some of the lightning, and for a few seconds the two continued to struggle, to try to get away. But in the end, the last sunstone exploded into dust, and the Empress Cathild and her Light Vizier were still. The violet crown that had been above Tal's head drifted across to them, and the bands of light rearranged themselves into a vaguely human shape. It hovered above the dead Chosen, raised its arms in triumph, and disappeared in a fall of violet sparks.
"Did you do that?"
asked Adris.
"I like the lightning."
"No," said Tal wearily. "That, I think, was the death curse of the Emperor Merkur. I just delivered it. He got up and dusted himself off. He didn't go and look at the bodies. There wasn't much left of them, and the ground around them was still smoking. "What were you going on about just then?" asked Tal. Asked Adris. He was inspecting the burn marks on a nearby pole.
Oh, a ship.
He pointed. Tal looked. Sure enough, a large boat was approaching the island. It was brightly lit with sunstones and crammed with the Empress's guards and other chosen. A familiar, rotund figure was standing at the bow. "Sushin," groaned Tal. Now was not the time to confront him, or to try to win the chosen over. Not with the Empress and the light vizier dead at his feet. "I hope you haven't had so much water you can't fly," Tal said.
Why?
"Because we have to fly, of course," shouted Tal.
There's no need to shout.
Sniffed Adris.
Where are we going?
Tal shook his head. He felt incredibly tired again. "I don't know. Away from here before that boat lands."
Too late for that,
said Adris.
It just did.
"It can't have," said Tal. He didn't bother to look. "It was hundreds of stretches away."
No,
explained Adris patiently.
the other ship. The one I didn't see before.
Tal looked. Another boat full of guards had grounded on the western shore. The first chosen were jumping off the bow. They saw him, and an angry shout went up. Tal's tiredness disappeared. He turned to run, tugging at Adris's hand. "Come on," he shouted, holding up both arms. "Run and take off!"
I feel sick,
announced Adris. But he pushed off the ground and grabbed Tal's arms as he lifted him into the sky. The very low part of the sky. Tal was dragged along the ground and only saved from being sliced apart because two flower creatures leaned over backward to let him past. "Higher!" Tal screamed. For a moment his feet rested on the shoulders of a golden statue. He jumped off and they gained a bit of height, only to lose it again as Adris groaned and dipped. They were almost at the lake on the far side of the island when Adris finally managed to get properly airborne. He kept heading toward the crater rim, mindful of all the chosen and their sunstones that were behind them. Tal breathed a sigh of relief, only to lose it in panic as he realized something truly horrible. He dropped the red keystone when they were knocked over back in the courtyard.